PFL is having their big super mega fight between Francis Ngannou versus Renan Ferreira, the battle of the giants, and at least according to PFL, an MMA super fight. And the future for this fight and the PFL is not looking good. I mean, for the record, this is happening next weekend, next Saturday, and I'm confident that almost none of you knew about this, not even me, and I am active in the MMA space every single day. Okay, forget about the promotion, it's awful, but the pay-per-view price? Well, they're definitely not helping themselves. This pay-per-view event is actually a decent card, but the only credible name that people actually care about is Francis Ngannou. But for some reason, they have priced this entire event at $50. To put that into comparison, the boxing super fight that happens between Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol is only $20. And the Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois fight was also only $20. Yes, the UFC events are $80, but this is UFC we are talking about. The quality of the fights are much better. Every single UFC pay-per-view card have multiple big names going into the event. But for some reason, PFL thought putting this event at $50 pay-per-view plus the DAZN or the ESPN subscription was a really financially good idea. And it is not even just the lack of promotion or the pay-per-view price that's a problem, but also the timing. It's actually in the middle of the Saturday, not the usual night time the fight fans are familiar with. And the biggest promotion PFL did for this event, which apparently cost the same amount UFC spent for the UFC Noche card, and it's not me saying this, it's the PFL co-founder Donn Davis saying this, and somehow this high-budget, incredible trailer got a whopping 52,000 views on YouTube. There are literal post-fight speeches on the UFC that gets more views than the trailer for this event. And they're doing all of these bad decisions at the time in where PFL is financially struggling every single event. If you're familiar with MMA and UFC in general, you know PFL is not making a lot of money. Their pay-per-views are generally overpriced and nobody is really interested in watching them. But you don't have to trust your intuition or mark my word for it. Here's Mike Heck from MMA Fighting talking about PFL's financial struggles.
What is the normal price of a PFL pay-per-view?
$50. But the problem is no one's buying it. We'll never get the numbers, but like internal discussions and all that, they're awful numbers.
Now, Mike and folks at MMA Fighting are pretty close people with all of these promotions. You can really trust their word even more than my own. But if you still don't believe in the fact that PFL is financially struggling, well, here's Dynamite himself talking about it.
PFL posted a video about a few hours before her fight, kind of putting her down and play to go by.
I think when you're losing as much money as they are, go for it. Throw the kitchen sink at it. This guy just came out recently and said, you know, we're going to spend more money than they did on the Sphere. Well, that sounds brilliant. How many tickets are you going to sell? They're not very bright. They're drowning. They suck. I mean, they're not good at what they do.
Okay, I get it. Dynamite does not talk in favor of PFL. So what if we ask the PFL and Bellator fighters about the financial status of PFL? In case you're living under a rock, Bellator is now owned by PFL, and that is the reason why I'm about to give you evidence of both Bellator and PFL fighters talking about this. Here's Bellator fighter Douglas Lima talking about how PFL is not honoring his contract and also not giving him opportunities to fight.
Last guy I beat is fighting for the belt now. I am on the sidelines for a year now. What I heard was my purse was too high and PFL did not want to pay and honor my last fight on my contract.
And here's former Bellator champion Gegard Mousasi talking about how PFL is not honoring his contract, not giving him opportunities to fight, and also not making money behind the scenes.
I want to fight, but a little bit difficult with PFL. They don't honor the contracts. We'll see. They think I get paid too much. They are number 2, I guess, but I don't hear them making any money. Even ONE FC is like, if you look at it, oh, it's a big show, but they lose money all the time.
Oh, it doesn't stop there. It gets much worse. Here's Bellator fighter Sabo Homasi talking about how PFL owes him $32,000 to cover his surgery fees.
Homasi started to notice a delay in the generally speedy approval process he would go through with Bellator fight insurance and promotion representative Ian Matthews. Homasi claims Matthews suggested he go ahead and pay out of pocket to get his procedure and blood work done. One day we are trying to get hold of Ian, can't get hold of Ian. He's completely ghosted us, Homasi said. I'm somewhere between $30,000 and $32,000 out of pocket. PFL saying to get in contact with Viacom? I don't know if they're pointing the finger back and forth at each other. It's just crazy that something like this at this level is happening. You gotta take care of your fighters, man. They put their lives on the line every time they fight.
And here's PFL fighter Baki talking about how PFL has not even paid him his full fighting purse for his last fight.
I haven't received any offer from the PFL and I haven't even been paid in full since the fight. I made a detour for the people. Give me a reason to do it again or let me move on.
And this is one of the many instances of fighters coming out and saying PFL is not honoring their contracts. So that basically means that PFL will lock you down to a multi-year contract for a price like $40,000 to show and $40,000 to win. But when it's time to actually fight an opponent and sign that contract, they'll basically try to force you to get to fight to a much lower purse like $20,000 to show and $20,000 to win. And because of the fact that you already signed the multi-year contract, you can't even get out of that. And it's not even just that. We also know that they're not even paying their fighters their full purse, even weeks and months after the fight has already ended. And they are also on record for not reimbursing surgery fees for fighters. And add on the fact that PFL is not giving opportunities for these fighters to actually fight multiple times a year. The logistics situation and the financial situation PFL is in is a total disaster. And then finally they get the chance to put on an amazing event and get a lot of eyeballs into their promotion. What do? Well, they do absolutely no credible promotion. A lot of people do not even know the fight is happening, and they have priced themselves at such a high price where not even the really hardcore fans would even give a damn to pay that much money to watch Francis Ngannou versus Ferreira when they can probably watch the knockout or the decision as a Twitter highlight. It's sad because I want PFL to succeed. The beauty of capitalism only retains if we have a good competition. And when we have good competition, you know who wins? Us consumers. Like, for example, think about Apple and Samsung. You know, they release their phones every single year. When Samsung releases their really cool feature, Apple copies it. And when Apple does something, Samsung copies it and put it on their own phone. They always try to look at the other and make their own product much better, so their consumers have a valid reason to stay with them. And if they don't do enough, then the consumers will switch to the other side. And they don't want that happening. Because imagine if Apple was the only company to exist, or vice versa. The actual phone or other product might not be that good because the consumers do not have any alternatives. And that is the situation we are stuck in MMA. But thank God UFC is actually really good. Sure, they have their problems, but at least UFC pays their fighters on time. I mean, yeah, some of these UFC fighters are really underpaid. I mean, I don't think 13k to show and 13k to win is a good contract for any UFC fighter. I think they should be paid more. But something you can never blame the UFC for is not paying their fighters. Yeah, in certain cases they may be underpaid, but at least guys, they're getting the money. Unlike PFL, who lie to them about the actual money they're getting, or does not even cover injuries that were sustained during their own events fights. And if the PFL becomes a really great rivalry to the UFC will have no option but to make their product every single day better and better. They can't fill that divisions with good for nothing regional talent, because if PFL had competent rosters, then the better fighters are with them. Or UFC will no longer be able to slack off with their promotion. They will have to promote their fighters more. They'll have to make cool trailers because PFL is doing it and they are doing it much better. Every single day, PFL learns a new way to mess things up, and even when they finally get these cool opportunities, they completely miss the mark, and UFC will continue to thrive. But why is this happening? Well, the answer to this is Donn Davis, the co-founder of PFL, and the whole company's mentality. For the record, I have a problem with his name being Donn because my name is also Donn. Apparently he has two N's in the name, so at least that's the difference. Because trust me, I do not want to have the same prefix as this dude, because Donn Davis is absolutely petty. To give you one example as of to how petty Donn Davis and PFL can be, when Kayla Harrison left PFL for the UFC, main reasons being that PFL is actually not letting her fight and just not simply giving opportunities. So she left PFL for the UFC and she already fought twice, with the second time being UFC 307 last weekend, Ketlen Vieira versus Kayla Harrison. But do you know what Donn did? Donn basically tweeted out this, but it's genuinely embarrassing because this tweet did not get a lot of likes. So do you know what this guy did? He paid Twitter to run ads of this tweet so he would get more likes. I mean, how petty can you be? My goodness. And not just that, like the last weekend when Kayla Harrison fought, PFL put this out. they put the only loss Kayla Harrison suffered in their promotion just so they can belittle and look down on Kayla Harrison. Also, for the record, it's important to note that PFL does not allow elbows, and Kayla Harrison is great at elbows. And the reason why PFL is not allowing elbows is because PFL is a joke of a promotion that can't even have a proper rule set for an MMA fight. And this whole mentality becomes much obvious when you realize the whole goal of PFL is not to make a great product, but to one-up the UFC. Basically, their whole philosophy is look at what UFC do and how can we hurt their business? How can we hurt the popularity of the UFC? How can we hurt the promotion of the UFC? How can we hurt the pay-per-view numbers or the live gate of the UFC? You see the problem here? Because the entire reason the UFC is so good is not because they wanted to one-up other MMA promotions or one-up even boxing. The entire goal of UFC and their entire philosophy is to do what they are good at to the best of their ability. Always be a tiny bit better and just be themselves and do good events. They could not care less about what happens in boxing. They could not care less about what happens in other MMA promotions. When you're talking about a promotion in which majority of the fans transition from boxing, you would assume that UFC would, try to be similar to boxing and get the influences from there a lot. But in reality, UFC just simply cut down a lot of aspects of boxing that were completely needless and pointless. And they made their own product much better. Whereas PFL, well, they just want to one-up the UFC, just copy whatever they are doing and not have their own personality. And this is simply the problem, because what PFL is trying to be is a less better version of UFC. And why would I watch a less better version of the UFC when I can just watch the UFC? The entire way they're handling business makes no sense. And when they're financially struggling, when they can't put up numbers, you know what they do? They put the Francis Ngannou versus Ferreira fight for $50 and make the barrier to entry so much high on a Saturday and a godforsaken time in which no fighting fan is familiar with, and do little to no promotion to actually promote the fight. It's genuinely embarrassing. I want PFL to succeed. I want Bellator to succeed. And sooner or later, they are going to run out of fuel and they are going to crash and burn. And that day, PFL will realize it's too late. So, ladies and gentlemen, I personally might watch the event as a Twitter highlight and then go on to watch the UFC fight night between Anthony Hernandez and Michel Pereira, and I'm really looking forward to that fight. And if you enjoyed this video, can I ask you to consider liking this video? Because then YouTube pushes this video for more people and it helps me out a lot. And also, I consistently upload, so consider subscribing and then you will not miss out on my future videos. And by the way, check this video out. Apparently, Alex Pereira has been suffering from multiple injuries leading up to the Khalil Roundtree fight, and this new information put the entire fight to a whole different perspective. Check that video out and I will see you soon in a couple of days. Signing out, my name is Donn Kusal.